Welcome. This is the Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing podcast. This is where you'll learn strategies to help you achieve lifetime financial freedom through real estate investment. Your host, Rod Khleif, has owned over 2,000 homes and apartments, and he brings experts in all aspects of real estate investment and management onto the show. Now, here's your host, Rod Khleif.
Welcome to another edition of How to Build Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing. I'm Rod Khleif, and I'm thrilled you're here. And I know we're going to get a ton of value from the gentleman we're interviewing today. His name is Beau Beery, and he is owner of a commercial real estate brokerage up in Gainesville, Florida. And I've known Beau for quite a while now, and I will tell you, he adds a ton of incredible content to people he's doing business with. I get emails from him regularly. He's co-owner of a 90-plus agent, award-winning real estate brokerage firm, and his specialty is the purchase and sale of multifamily assets, which is what we talk about on this show. So we are going to get a ton of value from him today. Beau, thanks for being here, buddy.
Yeah, man, no problem. I'm happy to do this.
This will be a lot of fun. Now, guys, we are going to dig in deep to really the acquisition process, the due diligence, what to review before you go in. I mean, what to review once you're in the due diligence period. And Beau is an expert at all this. So we're going to kind of dig deep on this. So, you know, some of this content may not be as fluffy as you like, but it's really important. So hang in there with us, because if you're serious about this business, this is information you must have. So Beau, before we start, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got in the business and a little bit more about you.
Sure. My first sort of real job, if you will, was I worked for Trammell Crow Residential back in the late 90s. And at least at the time, they were one of the largest apartment developers in the country. And I was just on-site manager of a 400-unit apartment community. I did the leasing, I did the management. And it was there where I got sort of that first taste of watching, 1,000 people pay for a $30 million asset. And I thought to myself, man, I got to get in this business. This is amazing. And I never saw the owners. Like they just, it was just kind of on autopilot. And so through that process, Trammell Crow paid for education. I got my real estate license. I then went back and did my master's degree in real estate from the University of Florida, which is one of the top 5 graduate real estate programs in the country. I had also done my undergrad in marketing from UF. Upon graduation, I worked for a local, or I guess the main local developer here in town, just did various shopping centers, office buildings, apartments. And in 2011, I joined forces with Todd Rainsberger, Jay Parrish, and Susan Parrish to acquire Coldwell Banker here locally. And ever since then, I've been doing brokerage for the masses, if you will. And my specialty is multifamily. It's what I love. It's what I know. It's sophisticated. There's numbers involved. There's no emotions. It's just business and numbers, and that's what I like. Yeah,
it's very empirical. You have to leave the emotions out of it, and that's what's so beautiful about it. If you understand the numbers, all things being equal, of course, you want to check out the areas and all things being equal, but it really is numbers driven. Yeah. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about the important things you have to do prior to going to contract. So let's go right into that.
Sure. So let me just kind of put a couple of things out there, even before that is, okay. Generally speaking, any kind of multifamily asset that is on a website, that is email blasted around, like that's a big caution. I would go into those slow and with a lot of with a lot of trepidation, if you will, because most good multifamily brokers, or let's just call it the best of the best, they've already got a pool of buyers that they know, have done business with, that show up to closings. And typically when something that's any good at all hits the market, if you will, if you've seen it come across your email or if it's on websites, it's probably already been shopped around, right? So inherently it's already got something to overcome or what have you. Now, listen, there's still good deals out there that may come across the websites. It happens. Some brokerages, just by the nature of the way they do business, they put everything out there, period, no matter what. There's few of those, but there are some things you can find on there. So, I don't see any other way to find good assets other than, number one, You've got a broker or several brokers that you're working with on a regular basis that you're very close with, that you're keeping contact with, and I'm going to tell you how you do that. Or secondly, you're doing that work yourself. And frankly, that has to be full-time. Like, I mean, finding good assets, that is a full-time job. That is what I do all day long. And so if you're not going to have some brokers that are in your pocket that are in love with you and you're in love with them, you're the one that needs to find the properties. You're the one making phone calls all day long. You're the one that's sort of drip marketing yourself into them and that you're keeping contact with them. So that leads me to, how do you get brokers, okay, to pay attention to you and to bring you deals? You want me to go into that, Rod?
Absolutely. No, let's do that. Let's do that next, because everybody's encountering that right now. Because if you haven't taken down a deal, for example, you're new, it's very difficult to get a broker to take you seriously. And I tell people on the show here, it's very, very important to follow up with a broker if they send you a deal. But I want you to dig in from a broker's perspective. How does somebody get noticed? How does somebody get taken seriously?
Good. So let me give you sort of 5 things that you should do and 5 things that you should never do. Okay.
Awesome.
Some of the things you should do are, you need to be updating your broker a couple times a year just to stay on the top of their mind. Now that seems obvious, but let me make sure you understand. You are only as good, and as a broker, I tell my brokers this all the time, you're only as good as your last touch with your customer. And likewise, as an investor, you're only as good as your last touch with your broker. Because listen, you could think you have the best relationship in the world with a broker and vice versa. And that guy could be at some social meeting or a dinner event, and he runs into some other investor and they're having a beer and they're talking about, oh, I used to live there. And oh, I know that guy and I know that guy. And all of a sudden it's like the next day they're best friends. And that guy gets some apartment complex that he's doing a BOV on, and guess who he's going to call? It's the guy who's fresh in his mind. I've seen it happen a million times. I've lost tons of deals myself with customers who I thought were like my blood almost. It's just, it's not someone who's trying to be a prick. It's just human nature. Like, you hit off with someone.
Oh, sure. If you find somebody new and they tell you they're interested in deals, by the way, guys, a BOV is a broker's opinion of value, for those of you who didn't know what that meant. But absolutely, that recurring contact is critical. And I tell people, get a CRM and use a CRM so you stay in front of these people you need to stay in front of. CRM, by the way, guys, is a client relationship management software, and there's lots of free ones practically free ones online. But if you're going to do this business, you have to do it for the long game, and you have to develop those relationships and stay on top of them. And we're talking about brokers now, but the same thing applies to bankers and lenders. But let's go back to brokers. So stay in front of them regularly. I think 2 times a year, frankly, is, in my opinion, not enough. But I think every couple of months, every 3 months, you send them an email, say, hey, I'm still looking. How are you? Or a phone call, or, have lunch or whatever, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from a broker to an investor, we have to limit ourselves so we aren't annoying, because those investors are getting calls from dozens of brokers. But when it's in the reverse, when the investor is keeping in touch with us, you can call me every 3-4 weeks. Like, that's great. That shows me motivation. That shows me that you're in the game to win, because ultimately all we give a crap about is that you show up to closing.
That's right. You don't get paid unless the closing papers get signed.
Right.
So, the motivation, I'm sure, is a big factor in your decision-making as to who you're going to deal with.
Yeah.
Yes? Okay.
Right.
Okay, what else? You said 5 things.
Yeah. Number 2 is, if you don't know that broker, he doesn't know you, show him that you have a proof of funds. And that could be a letter from your lender. It could be something from your CPA or financial advisor, but something that says, hey, this guy has enough assets, enough ability, to buy a $5 million complex, a $2 million complex, a $20 million complex. Because, we get calls all the time and emails all the time, just like you do, from folks saying, hey, we're looking for an apartment complex, value add, 100 plus units. And so when someone shows us a financial statement or shows us a bank account, you can have their information blanked out or whatever. We know these guys have the capacity. So that sort of check marks off that part of it. Right.
So guys, let me interject something. That's great. Fantastic advice. And let me interject something. Remember this, guys, this is a team sport. Okay. So if you're out there and you don't have the proof of funds, then go find somebody that does. Bring them in on the team. Okay. If the net worth requirement isn't there, find somebody, put them on the team, and get the net worth requirement that you need to get the financing, because it's a team sport. This is not a single game. So please continue.
Yeah. Okay. So number 3, and this is a big one.
Okay.
When we bring you an investment, I need you to act extremely fast on the deal. Now, let me make sure you understand what I mean by that. I don't mean that in 48 hours, you need to know everything about the property and turn in an offer that's, bam, bam, bam. I just need to know in 48 to 72 hours whether you want to take a run at this or not, okay? Because you have to understand, if I'm bringing you something off market, okay, then as a broker, I don't want to look incompetent to my seller, okay? First of all, if I'm coming to you, it means that you're a real deal guy, that I believe you can bring the best value to my customer who I'm representing. And so if I come to you, I can't just talk to 1 or 2 people and let them take 2 weeks to make a decision whether or not they want to go see it or underwrite it. If it's a no, that's totally cool. I respect that if you like, but tell me quickly, all right?
Yep.
That's a killer.
No, that's so simple. That's so obvious, but so important for people to hear. So that's awesome. Great.
Yep.
Keep going.
All right. Number 4, if an unlisted seller, someone who's got a property that I found that it's not on the market, he'll take an offer. If that guy won't pay me or won't pay the broker for procuring, we need to have an understanding before I even bring you something like that you'll pay me, because this is an unprotected world sometimes in doing some of this and doing some of the dealing from a broker standpoint. And so if the best listings are not on the market, then that means there's not usually sometimes a signed listing agreement up front. Or sometimes
because this market's really hot, guys. So you're talking about integrity, bottom line. And if you haven't got integrity, you may get one deal, but this is a small world. I mean, this commercial real estate world is a small world. Right. You screw a person once or twice, you're done.
You're dead forever.
You're dead forever. So basically, and so what he's saying, guys, is if he has an off-market listing and he brings you to that seller to put the deal together, because the seller, sellers are funny, guys. You'll get sellers that just refuse to sign anything until you show them a contract, or, they won't list it. But if you bring them a contract, great. But you've got to protect your broker. You've got to make sure they get paid. All right. Awesome.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. And, listen, no broker is going to get paid from a seller, but then tell you he's not, and then have you pay him so he gets double commission.
No,
that's going to show up on a HUD.
Oh yeah, no. That integrity goes both ways, but brokers are held to a very high standard and governed and watched and regulated, so that's not going to happen. But no, I mean, if he's not getting paid from the seller, he's got to get paid. So
that's right.
Don't be penny wise and pound foolish.
All right, the 5th thing you should do is close on deals, right? The more you close, the more deals you'll see from more brokers. Now, if you come across something that just, 55 dead bodies were under the building and there's just horrible, horrible things going on that was unbeknownst to anybody, I get if you don't close or something needs to be redone or retraded. But generally speaking, the more you close, the more deals you're going to see.
Oh, that's a no-brainer. And once you close, then you're really taken seriously, and that's so critical. But like you said, I mean, if the due diligence shows things that weren't disclosed or there was misrepresentation, significant, I mean, not minor stuff, then that changes things a bit, and you should at the very least try to retrade or renegotiate. All right, awesome.
All right. 5 things you should never do, Rod.
Okay.
Never, ever go around a broker directly to their client. Okay. Huge.
Again, integrity.
Yeah. And I shouldn't have to say this, but it goes on all the time. And and sometimes the guy thinks he's being innocent. Sometimes he is just, trying to save something, but that's just the worst thing you can do. And listen, you may win in that one situation, but you're going to lose overall. Let me tell you, it's not
same. It really, it will shock you guys how small this world really is. I mean, this commercial multifamily space. And so, that's just, in any business, frankly, you just do the right thing. So, okay. All
right. Number 2 kind of goes to my, what you should do, but don't renegotiate or retrade a deal with a seller unless there's some huge surprises. I just hit on this, but let me give you a couple of other examples. I mean, there are folks for whom have a business plan, okay, whose business plan is actually to put deals under contract at whatever they can, just so they can get off the market as soon as possible. They get, through 44 days of the 45 due diligence period. They've done close communication, interaction. They're acting like they're, super into it. The seller's making plans with the money and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, oh, I need $1 million off, or, oh, I need $200,000 off. Like, horrible, horrible, horrible thing you can do. Number one, you will never do another deal with that seller. Number two, I will never bring you another deal. Number three, it just makes you look bad, and that word spreads like wildfire, man. The most dangerous thing in the world, Rod, is the stuff that's being said about you that you don't even know is happening. Like,
sure.
That stuff spreads in this world in multifamily field so quick.
Yep.
I know a number of people who are just frustrated they can't do deals, but I know what their reputation is in the market because of things they've done over the last few years.
Yeah. There you go. Okay.
Yep.
Common sense stuff, guys. Okay.
So number three, obviously never sit on a deal that a broker brings you. We talked about that.
Right.
And I talked about how it's okay to pass it. So I'll sort of move past that one. But number four, don't give a broker impossible purchase criteria. Okay. So
give me an example.
So I get calls all the time from folks who are saying, hey, I'm looking for a stabilized C asset in an A location, 9% cap rate. Like, get out of that is just ridiculous. It doesn't exist. Not only is it not that's not even considered a unicorn. That's like a double unicorn with like a horse butt and dog legs. Like, it just doesn't even make any sense.
No, it's definitely not on market. That's for sure. And I don't even think you'd find something like that off market. But no, we're in a hot market right now. So be realistic. I get it. Unless you've got, an off market campaign looking for, we do mailers. We're doing very, very well. And we teach it in my course, how to find off market deals. But if you're dealing with brokers, don't expect a 9 cap in a, like he just described. It's not going to happen. Not today. Yeah. Maybe when the contraction happens, but not today.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Fifth and final thing you should never do with a broker. This goes back to, never going around and so forth. But I want to make sure this is not a broker's greed or a broker, I'm trying to teach how you get more deals, and this is part of it. So the fifth thing is, don't ever ask the broker to reduce his already contractually obligated commission in order to solve an issue that came up in a transaction to close that has nothing to do with the situation. So let me give you examples, okay? So, you're involved in a deal, and let's say that the seller gave you a document that you relied upon that ended up not actually being totally true. The seller thought it was true. It's not true. The attorneys reviewed it. It's going to cost the buyer some money. Why come to the broker and say, come off your fee the equivalent of 30%? Like, what does that have to do with me? I just brought you the deal. I brought the two of you together. We're the ones making this happen. I'm certainly willing to budge. I'm certainly willing to throw into the deal. But the proportion that brokers sort of get asked
it's out of whack. It happens a lot. It happens a lot in residential as well. Sure. And, the bottom line is, guys, if you want more deals from the broker, you got to think about these things. I mean, I have to be honest. I've had brokers make concessions before, and I did it on my personal residence. But in the multifamily space, if you want deals from a broker, you have to take very good care of that broker. And this just goes, it's commonsensical. This just goes with the territory. And if it's not the broker's fault for whatever is happening, there you go. So,
yeah. And
all right.
The key word there, Rod, is proportionate. Like,
okay.
Hey, listen, all of us are deal makers. I've certainly budged on commissions all the time. I'm happy to do so because if both parties are sort of taking a hit, it's when you've got a $10 million deal and there's a $100,000 discrepancy. Okay. So like a 1% discrepancy. and you come back to the broker and are asking him to take a 30% hit. Like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. No, that makes complete sense. All right, well, let's move into what to ask for before you start your due diligence, or really during due diligence. So go ahead and speak to that, please.
Sure. So some of the things that I ask for, that I always want for the buyers to ask for, obviously income statements or tax returns would be sort of like the gold seal, if you will.
Sure.
And I like them for the previous 2 years and year to date. So like right now it would be 2015, 2016, year to date 2017.
Yep.
And now, when you're looking at tax returns, there's a lot of fluff sometimes that are put in tax returns in order to reduce taxes. And so you'll have to kind of peel through some of those things and remove them. But tax returns are usually far more accurate. Some of the 75 plus unit investors, they're using really good property management software, so their income statements are pretty reliable. It's once you get under 50 units that you get the Excel spreadsheet sort of,
if you get that, right. If you get that, right. No, I get it.
Those are the tough ones. That's when you really want tax returns.
Okay. Now, and you're not always going to get them, but at least if you get tax returns, you can assume that the income portion is accurate. You can tie in expenses, and it's better than just, the seller telling you what the expenses are and you hoping that you're accurately projecting what they should be.
Right.
What else?
Yep. So obviously, a rent roll to me is probably one of the most important things, because oftentimes I've done tons of deals just in the last couple of years in which all we have was a rent roll, right?
Right.
And with today's technology and data and information that's available to you, if you had no expenses whatsoever for the property, you can even sometimes have pretty good accurate estimates. The National Apartment Association puts out a report that I read cover to cover every single year on operating expenses. That's across like 4,000 properties. It's broken up by different sections of the U.S., by age, by size, by everything. And so pretty close you can come up with, all the way down to administrative expenses, to property management, to all that stuff, and create your own pro forma on the expenses. If you have the rent roll, that's big time, because that has the unit mixes. It has what kind of deposits are there. Sometimes if you've got, too little deposits, you better have really good rental criteria or be very cautious. Or if you have too large deposits per person, that could mean there's a lot of bad credit tenants in there, right? So they want to get stuff in replacement. Start and end dates are pretty important on the rent roll. You're kind of looking for the better is to have scattered end dates.
Right. You don't want a bunch of leases expiring in the same month. That can be something to be concerned about. Okay.
Yep. Bank statements to me are big. Now
back to rent roll for just a second, buddy. Sure. I apologize. So in fact, maybe you're going to talk about it now, but yes, the rent rolls are very, very important. And by the way, that report from the National
Apartment Association. Sorry, brain fart there for a minute. Yeah, that report, we just gave that to our coaching clients. I mean, it is killer, and highly recommend that you use that to come up with those percentages. Right? I mean, to utilize those if you don't have the expenses, you can use those averages to come very, very close to what they should be. Correct? That's right.
All right. And back to rent roll for 1 second. The one thing that's critical to remember about rent roll, with all the importance of utilizing it and having it, is that you make sure that you're looking at economic occupancy, because just because they're on that rent roll doesn't mean they're paying. So speak to that. Maybe that's what you were going to talk about with the bank statement.
Yeah. So and bank statements cure that, right? Because a rent roll is an owner generated statement, right? I mean, even though a lot of the big guys would never ever fluff stuff like that, the bank statement. Listen, if you're $20 million for an asset, you're probably going to ask for bank statements to verify stuff, because you can.
Yeah, but like with a 30-unit owner or 20-unit owner, they may just be giving you an old one, and 2 or 3 of those people have moved out, or 2 or 3 of them aren't paying, or whatever, and it may not even be nefarious. It just may be incompetence. Right. So anyway, please continue.
Bank statements will sort of solve that. I mean, that's going to show the inflows and the outflows of the property, and you want to match them up with the income statements and the rentals. And that'll cure if there's delinquencies not telling you about.
Right. So it's critical to match those up, guys, is the point. Yeah. You've got to get bank statements, and you got to make sure that money's actually coming in, not just on the rent roll. Okay.
And if you can't get bank statements, my next thing to ask for is a list of delinquencies. Okay. So they should be able to come up with what each tenant owes. Okay. And you want to take a look at that. And obviously what what you're looking for there. I like to collect the last 3 months of a utility bills that the actual owner pays, for the clubhouse, for the vacants, for the exteriors. I like to match that up with the income statements to make sure that's good. And just in general, to make sure I understand exactly what I'm responsible for.
Sure.
Those are usually a pretty big percentage.
Sure.
Obviously, you want to ask for all vendor contracts. Okay, so the lawn guy, the pest control, the laundry. What you're looking for there is sort of the nitty gritty in the contract, and can you get out of things, and what are the costs? I just had a big deal I was working on where we thought that the cable agreement was cancelable with 30 days notice. It ended up being, it really wasn't. And so this was like a $12,000 a month cost property wide. And so it was a real sort of, kicker in the due diligence period because we had to kind of negotiate that part of it. And so it's not just enough to say, cable is it's cancelable, or the lawn guy, give him 60 days notice, whatever it is. Read the fine details, because those are made. I mean, listen, just $1,000 a month for landscaping.
Sure.
That's $12,000 a year. You divide that by a 7 or 8 cap. Tell me what that's worth. I mean, that's a huge.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. Yeah. So, laundry, all of those things. You've got to read those contracts or have an attorney read them. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
The next thing is the most recent property tax bill. Now you may say, Beau, well, you can get that off the internet. You can get that off the property appraiser. It's very rare, but I've seen instances in which the property appraiser wasn't updated, or it wasn't, just had an error, it's like a total blanket error. Or sometimes folks rely on, in some municipalities, they'll have a parcel number for the intangible tax, and sometimes for the parcel one. They're looking.
Oh, wow. And if you look at the intangible, you're in deep doo-doo. Oh, that's very, I haven't heard that before. I really appreciate that one. That's good. So get the bill.
Get the bill. If they have a prior title policy or survey, sometimes those are helpful, just preliminary to look at. If not, they provide savings when you're going to get.
Sure. It's definitely the survey. Yeah. You definitely want to get those if you can. Good.
Yep. Copies of all the leases and any amendments. And sometimes that doesn't mean, like for instance, if you're getting 50, 75 units or more, oftentimes you're just going into the clubhouse and you're spending a couple of days there.
You're on the conference room table and you're going through leases. And by the way, guys, if you're in the 50 plus unit range, that's one of the things that many property managers will help you with. They will go in and do your in-office due diligence. Yeah, bring them with you and let them help you with that. Now, you guys know I'm a huge proponent for self-management, but that said, cases like on these larger properties, and if you're just getting started, your first 1 or 2 assets, I highly recommend using a property management company until you're up to speed and fully understand the business. But they can be a huge asset when you're going through due diligence in a larger property.
Yeah, and those leases are more sort of hidden nightmares. You need to read all of them and don't get complacent once you look at 10 leases and you think, oh yeah, the next 10 are going to be the same. I'm good there. I mean, you need to read them all to make sure, because sometimes property managers, especially under 100 units, sometimes they're given liberty by the owners to do as they please to get a lease. And so they may have stricken out some of the main language for some tenants. There might be reduced deposits. There could be little sweetheart deals.
Free rent after a year, for a month. Yeah, I mean, we've seen it all. So absolutely, you read every single lease if you're doing it yourself.
Absolutely.
For sure. Okay.
All right. Last few things. List of capital expenditures done over the last 5 years. Now, some things may be obvious to you when you're doing a physical walkthrough, but there may be some other stuff that you just didn't know happened. And try to get the contracts or the deals or the invoices that were signed for those, just so you know, if nothing else, to be able to schedule in your CRMs, like my CRM, I can schedule anything I want in there. And so I actually have properties in my CRM, and I can schedule, okay, 3 years from now, I need to have the septic done, or 5 years from now, I need to have this done, whatever it is. And that stems from getting those CapEx expenditures from the seller.
Right. And if you're getting bank financing, they're typically going to want you to escrow something for future CapEx expenses anyway.
That's right.
So, by the way, what is that amount typically in your experience?
On
CapEx on a
pro forma?
Yeah.
So, the industry average the industry average, what people are actually spending per year when you look at National Apartment Association is between $800 and $900 a unit. However, banks and buyers are typically using anywhere from $250 to $500 a unit when they're putting their pro forma, depending on what's been done, right?
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought it was. I thought it was under 500. So
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I think the last thing was leases, or what was the last thing you said?
I got just last two are environmental reports.
Of course.
That nothing really to expand upon there.
No, let me add one thing there.
Yeah.
And that is, guys, you get what's called a phase one environmental report. Now, if you're out there doing off-market deals and you get a seller finance deal, still get the environmental report, because I will tell you the way it works. It's, they're checking for toxicity in the soil. And the way the EPA works is if you own the property, it doesn't matter when the oil tank was put in.
Nope.
Who caused the damage, does not matter. You as the owner are responsible, whoever owns it at that moment. So if you do a seller finance deal, normally you wouldn't get any third-party reports. You wouldn't probably get an appraisal or anything like that. You always get a phase one. Okay, that's this is Rod's opinion, but I'd rather spend $1,000, $1,500 for that right now than have a $500,000 cleanup because you didn't. So
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and just a quick 20-second war story.
Okay.
Back in the day, I bought a deal that I knew had environmental issues because it had one of those vacuum systems on it. I went into the county of where that property was, talked to the EPA guys. They told me all about it. It's all covered under the program, yada, yada, yada. They never told me about a second leak in there. And stupid me, I never got a phase one. It was very early on because I already knew it was contaminated. It was already covered by the state. Wow. And I was sitting in front of actual government officials, right, and they never mentioned that other thing. And guess who? Guess who gets it?
Yeah.
Even though they know it was caused by somebody else, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Even if they know who did it. One other caveat, since you said that, because that reminds me of something. Anytime, guys, that you are dealing with a government official of any kind, an inspector, EPA, anything like that, you always, always, always reduce the conversation to writing. You send an email and say, here's what we discussed and agreed upon. You never, ever, ever leave it verbal, okay? They talk to a lot of people. Sometimes they have an agenda. You just make sure you always reduce it to writing. Building inspectors, if you've got code violations, anything like that, you always reduce it to writing. Please write that one down. It's very, very important when you're dealing with any governmental official.
Rod, you just gave a $300,000 tip. That's the average cleanup.
Yeah. Well, there you go. All right. Yeah. No, I mean, this really applies to anything. If you've got some zoning issue, if you've got some environmental issue, if you've got a building department issue, anything, you make sure you reduce it to writing. I can't tell you how often that saved me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Last one, Rod. I always ask for a trial balance ledger, which is a report, and sometimes it's called something, it's called differently in different programs, but it's basically a report that shows all of the individual repairs per unit. Now, you don't need to look through every single repair of every single unit, but you can find common themes that are happening in the property, right? Because when you get an income statement, they will have a category called repairs and maintenance.
Right.
That would be, equivalent.
It's a catch-all. It's a catch-all. It's got everything.
Yeah,
right.
It's got everything in there. And so,
right.
And you can ask the property manager, hey, what are your common expenses, that you see, or what are the common calls that you get, and you'll get one answer. But that trial balance ledger, whatever the equivalent is in that property management software, that will tell you, like, boom,
Yeah. If you see them replacing a particular item regularly, you can anticipate it's going to get replaced in every single unit.
Yeah.
That's what you're referring to, correct?
That's correct.
Or a repair of some sort that's happens over and over again.
Yeah.
That's good. That's very important. Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
I tell my clients, my coaching clients, to always try to find out past contractors that have worked on the property and actually have conversations with them. Find out what they've encountered. Find out what things could pop up in the future that they've seen in the past. Maybe they've scoped the sewer lines and they know that something, there are roots coming in at some point, there's going to be a problem. Do you recommend that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's easy to do, and nobody can stop you from doing it when you're in due diligence and you've received, sort of the trial balance ledger will tell you who they paid and what they, so you can call those guys up. I mean, that's I mean, that's super forensic. Okay. But
Right.
listen, if you're putting millions of dollars into a deal, why not do it?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, what you can't see, you can't see, and
Yeah.
if if you don't know something's there, and and that's why it's a great idea to look at the capital expenditures. Maybe they've done some foundation work that you can't see, and we've had that happen before, and that maybe there's a drainage issue that they haven't solved. They've patched it, and you don't see it because it's not completely obvious. But those things can be very, very expensive. So, okay, good stuff. So what's next? What sort of a buying team, do you recommend having, and why?
Yeah. So when even before going into contract, if you have the relationships and the right folks who can show up quickly, I always suggest when you're walking the property, bring a property manager immediately. You'll be shocked at all the things they can tell you about the physicality of the building, the immediate area, the market in general, that could be totally contradictory to what you're seeing in an offering memorandum or what you think yourself.
That is very, very good advice.
Yeah.
And guys, if you don't have 300-400 units, you should always bring a property manager with you to get their market knowledge, to get their experience.
Yep.
Now, let me ask you a question back on that note. Any advice you have for finding the best property managers for a particular property?
Yeah. So when I'm over 100 units, I don't like to mess around. Right. It's just not worth it. And so I'm going for big dogs, right? I'm going for people who have a lot of units under management. Now, there could be some uneducated thoughts out there that, they've got a ton of properties, they're not going to be thinking about mine, blah, blah, blah. That's just not how it works. If they don't have a bunch of properties, there's probably a reason why they don't have a bunch of properties, right? I want people who've got lots of properties, for two reasons. Number one, people think they're good. And number two, especially when there's a lot of like-kind stuff, they're able to pull from tremendous amounts of marketing, right? So if they've got 6 or 8 conventional assets in a market that are between 100 and 300 units, and you're buying one of those, there's some good stuff there, right? I mean, you can really get some great sort of cross marketing, if you will.
Sure.
Once you get under 50, 75 units, it's really kind of a toss up. So you always want to have the best manager in the market, but sometimes depending on the type of asset, you don't want to go with one of the big regionals or nationals.
No, I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Clientele. A lot of those local guys who have sort of 10, 20, 30 unit communities, those guys can knock it out of the ballpark for you. And I certainly would at least mix them into the conversation.
Absolutely. Now, are there any screening sorts of thoughts that you might have about what to look for beyond their size requirements, or do you just go off recommendations? What do you recommend to clients? I like
to know who they're managing for, and the likelihood is I know some of those folks, right? Mm. Or if not, you're just calling them up and you're asking them, hey, do you mind if I give such and such a call? You manage for them. I know those guys. Can I ask them about you and so forth? And no one's going to tell you no. And if they're telling you no, that's red flag number one.
Yeah, no question. Right. Good.
You can find out more from those customers, than any kind of other research you can do.
I like it. All right. I like it. Other team members.
So if you don't have one already, you need to be best friends or have a phenomenal maintenance crew, whether it's one guy, 2 guys, whatever it is, they're taking care of some of your properties. Bring them along with you. They're super, super knowledgeable. When I walk properties with folks, I think I know what I'm doing, but they're always they'll go and point something out or touch something or bring something down. And I'm just I never even thought about that. But these guys they're the ones who are taking all these calls and doing all the work orders. They know what to look for. And it's just super important to bring them with you.
Absolutely. Or at the very least, a GC, bring somebody, bring a GC. If you don't have a maintenance guy yet. Oh, it's next on the list. Okay. Yeah. So if you don't have a full-time maintenance guy yet, then bring a general contractor. But ultimately you can't afford, you wouldn't want to pay a GC to do maintenance, but they can at least flag things that you may not see, potential upcoming, maintenance related issues, things that they'll see that you'll gloss over unless you've been doing this a very long time.
Yeah. I tend to use the maintenance guys for some of the very sort of decentralized, repair type stuff. And I bring the contractor along with, roof, structure, slab, parking lots. I mean, like major stuff like that.
Sure.
They know what to look for there.
Good.
And the other guy that I always try to bring, like in my second or third sort of tour, if you will, like when I know I want the asset, is my banker. I mean, I want him to see the asset, smell it, touch it. Like I want him to know it like I know it and get him involved in the deal.
Oh, that's very good advice. Very good advice. Yep. That's a good one. Now, let me ask you this. Let's talk about financing for a second. Well, I'm sure you're doing a lot of Fannie and Freddie type stuff, but when you say banker, are you talking about your mortgage broker? Or are you talking about regional banks if they're dealing with conventional, they're dealing with a regional or small bank?
Again, it depends on the asset, right?
Right,
I mean,
right.
If it's a localized asset that, for instance, I would say probably under 60, 70 units, I like at least considering other local lenders. They can give some pretty good terms.
Right.
Once you get into the bigger arena, that it's tough for the local bankers to sort of understand it. And so you're talking to the big boys. And I still want one of the big boys. I don't care if he's a state over or a couple of states over. I'd like him to come down and kind of walk this thing with me and take a look at it because, these guys aren't just bankers. I mean, they've underwritten, tens of millions and sometimes billions of dollars. They see things sometimes that you don't, right?
Sure. They've forgotten things that we won't even, we won't know for a long time.
They've taken back lots of properties and know why they've taken them back sometimes. Quite frankly, because of the physicality, and they can see things from other war stories.
Yep. Okay. Well, listen, we are unfortunately running out of time, and I was hoping we could go through kind of what to look for in the financials, but maybe we can do that on another episode.
Sure.
Guys, I really like Beau, and I hope you guys, if you're interested in buying any property in the northern half of Florida or the whole state, what do you handle the whole state or primarily north?
Central and North Florida.
Central and North, yeah. So if you have any interest there, definitely check him out. He's a good guy. And thanks for being on the show, my friend. You added a ton of value.
Yeah, man. Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. All right, take care.
Thank you for listening to the Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe and then take a moment to visit iTunes and leave a 5-star rating and review. For more resources to connect with us further, please visit our website at lifetimecashflowpodcast.com. Tune in next week for our next show.